Okay, so I wanted to talk a bit about diminished seventh chords. I mean, this is an absolutely massive subject, actually. And I think, like, a lot of the time we sort of stare at our feet and mumble and pretend like diminished seventh chords don't exist, because they're actually quite annoying. And they don't always follow the usual rules of like 2-5-1s, okay? But I think, like, in the process of getting to understand diminished seventh chords better, I've also understood other aspects of harmony better as well. So I'm just going to jump straight in. I'm going to give you an example of a tune which used to pose me some difficulties, and that's How Insensitive by Antonio Carlos Jobim. So I'll just play and sing the melody over the top. Okay, just those four chords and the melody going over them, which is just basically a static A decorated till it goes to that chord there, and then we have that move down to the G. I mean, it's just so beautiful. Just what could be more perfect than that? Apparently it's based on, I think, Chopin or something, which I can believe. So I think, like, this is one example where our conventional thinking, which I think in modern jazz education, is it fair to say, is based around 2-5-1s, and when we do encounter a diminished seventh chord, we play the half-whole scale over it. It's where it kind of breaks down for me. So, I mean, okay, so if we do this like conventionally, so we've got this sort of D minor ninth chord here, and we can play the Dorian mode over the top of that. And the next chord, well, we can play the diminished scale. And then Dorian again. And then, I mean, there's any number of options there. We won't really go into that for now. Okay, so for me, this is a cool sound, but it doesn't kind of get the simplicity and the, you know, melodiousness of a solo that has to happen over these changes for me. So that sort of made me think, is there another way to go about this? And there is. In fact, there's a couple of really good ways, which I'm going to talk about. So let me explain a bit the logic of what I'm going to talk about. So I think, like, in this is not the only example of this type of progression. I'm just going to isolate a couple of things that are quite unusual about it. So, or at least from the point of view of our theory. In fact, these progressions are not unusual at all, and I can think of tons of examples. I mentioned some of them. Okay, so the first thing is that we're in the key of D minor, obviously. That first chord is kind of a D minor tonic sound, really. It feels centered in that key. And then we're moving towards the subdominant of the relative major. So we're moving towards B flat, which is the flat 6 chord in D minor, or the 4 chord in F. But we're doing it in quite an unusual way. And there's a descending bass. Now, a diminished chord is the second chord that we play. This chord does not resolve upwards, like most diminished chords we come across. But sorry, or it's a bad key for me, but anyway, you get the idea, right? So that's a couple of tunes that use that progression, where it goes C, C sharp diminished, D, D sharp, E. Each of these cases, we have what we call leading tone diminished chords in classical theory. So it's like on the leading tone, which is the 7th or half step below the target. So we have a really strong relationship between the diminished chord and its target. And what that actually is, it's tonicization, where we're calling those chords D minor and E minor like temporary tonics. Another way of doing that is just to play 2-5-1s. Sorry. You know, which is kind of a substitute for that progression, and you do hear people play that as well. Really, they're the same thing. So you can see that C sharp diminished 7th chord as being an incomplete A7 with a flat 9. It's got all the same notes apart from the A. Boom, 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 bum. But if we just use the diminished, we get that lovely, smooth, chromatic, ascending bass line. Okay. And another example I'd like to point to is the bridge of James by Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny is using very open triadic harmony in this song. So let me see if I can remember it. It goes... Okay, for that little bit. So what we got there is a first inversion major triad. I'm playing this in spread voicing. Going to a root position target chord. Minor in that case, major in that case, minor in that case, major. All belonging to the same key. In this case they're all separated by thirds. It's kind of a pattern. But you can hear that it sounds kind of classical. Now in the case of A misbehaving, we could do the same thing. This is maybe how Pat Metheny plays A misbehaving, I don't know. Okay, so, I mean, that means we have a rather nice relationship between a diminished chord and a major chord. Now, major chords are a lot more familiar than diminished sevenths. And also, I mean, while we can always just play the arpeggio, it starts to sound a bit like silent movie music if we do it too much. It's nice to have some other melodic devices at our disposal. So in that case, what you can do is you can simply take advantage of that connection. So even though we're running backwards, we have D minor, right, play that as written, C sharp diminished or D flat diminished, and we can really play that as an A7 or an A major. So, and the beautiful thing is we can also do that about the next chord, which is G slash B, or G7 slash B. So what we get is kind of like a backwards sort of thing. So instead of going, you know, 5-1 or 2-5-1, we're kind of going 1-2-5, 1-2-5, which is a bit strange, but it does work, provided we're able to connect the A major and C minor chords. So let's just try this. You'll see, like, that doesn't necessarily, in fact, there's kind of a nice kind of diminished scale style relationship there between the G and the B flat chord. But the thing is that, like, this chord belongs entirely to like the whole half scale. You know, it belongs to that, but it kind of sounds more open, because we're not playing every note. And we can add in maybe a couple of extra notes, like I really like the flat 9 on this. So is it... Yeah, make a lot out of that half step. Anyway, it's hard not to start playing those changes. So, a couple of other things I'd note about, like when we played that Pat Metheny version, I mean, Pat Metheny is coming out of the Beatles, right, out of... Oh, sorry. Okay, that's what that tune, Blackbird, outlines, is the same kind of ascending structure with diminished chords, right? So, really, all Blackbird is a set of tenths. Well, not entirely tenths, but we could play it like that, right? So, and if we look at things like this progression, and let's do descending tenths, that's enough to give you the sense of the progression, right? Of course, we can add the extra notes in, like we can add the minor seventh in here. Then it goes B flat, right? It's diatonic. Okay, so that's something to think about. It's like descending, or you could do it in minor thirds. That is essentially what the progression is, plus the melody, which is a pedal point. So it's worth understanding these things like compositionally, as well as, you know, from the point of view of just harmony. Okay. Right. So aside from that relationship, which is good, I think, for which is good for creating this nice sort of melodic flow. There's also a scalic implication. Now, if I play just these two chords and I lay them out into arpeggios, well, I'm going to sound very classical. What we actually end up with are all the notes of the D harmonic minor. So, why not just play the D harmonic minor over that? And then same thing with the C minor. And if you want to honour the first chord, which is a minor 7th, say, or minor 6th, minor 9th, you can play the Dorian, but then you can just smoothly, modally interchange it for a harmonic minor. Do the same thing down. And that makes sense with the melody. It stays on the 6th, right? So if anybody is familiar with the Barry Harris stuff, and your mind cogs might be spinning around right now as you see to relate that to like the minor 6th diminished scale, which you can do. But I'm not going to talk about that here. One Barry Harris thing I am going to talk about is the way you can derive that harmonic minor scale, and it's really quite pretty. So, for instance, in our Hammond sensitive, if I take the D minor and we take the C7 as the second chord, we can relate that to a C sharp diminished simply by raising the C sharp up to a C up to a C sharp like that, right? Okay. We can do that with the scale as well. So we can just take the C mixolydian mode, or the dominant scale, as we old school players call it, and we just change that that C to a C sharp. We can do that at any point in the line. So. Make it strong rhythm. And it's another way of giving you, something which isn't just like the diminished 7th arpeggio, which is a great sound, but if you overuse it, it can get a bit predictable. So just to recap, of course you can play the whole half scale even, and of course you can play the diminished 7th arpeggio, but you've also got the related major, which is kind of a major third below the diminished, or whatever relates to the previous chord, or the target chord, depending on which way the diminished chord is going. And you can also play the harmonic minor on the, related chord. Some people might talk about the harmonic major. That's okay as well. You can use that for when it works on a major. But in this specific example, you would use harmonic minor. And you can even use harmonic minor resolving to major in the major examples as well. I'm just going to give you a few more examples where we have this kind of chord progression. I Can't Give You Anything But Love. G going to B flat diminished. Embraceable You. Okay, again the same key. We have it in Night and Day. It's a good example. So that is interesting because this time the melody sits not on the 3rd, as one would expect, but on the 7th. So we start on an F sharp. In this example, we start on an F sharp half diminished chord. so that's basically that. So then play the full chords. Okay, so that becomes F sharp half diminished, F minor 7th, E minor 7th, E flat major, E flat diminished 7th, D minor, G7 C major. Okay, so I mean that is another example of that kind of movement. There's loads more, just like keep spotting them. And in all of these cases, again, it's like that movement from the flat 3 down to the 2-5 is the sort of, it's kind of unusual because it's not relating to an obvious 2-5-1, or at least one that wasn't obvious to me. Lastly, I just want to quickly talk about the ways in which you can find these things substituted. So it really depends on the melody. In this case, Night and Day, we have against the E flat, we've got like a major 7th going to a 6th. So that sound, you know, in particular context that it's got, you know, you'd expect a diatonic flat 5 as well, which kind of completes a diminished chord. But I can't really substitute that with an obvious 2-5-1. So your options there are actually quite limited. I mean, that sounds a bit ugly to me. So I played the wrong one before. You could try that, you know. But, you know, you'll often hear people, I mean, like in the case of Darn That Dream, they even change the melody at the end, you know, to kind of fit one of these side slip 2-5-1s in. So I'll play you... oh, how's it go? Yeah, something like that. So, so the original there has a B flat diminished. Most people know the version which is changed. So it goes. Oh, I can't remember my play now. Put a chromatic voice leading in, so they can play. It's very beboppy. B minor 7 flat 5, E flat 7. Anyway, so you do find those tunes substituted, and sometimes even the melodies changed in them to allow this kind of motion to be used. But if you sort of dig back into the flat 3 diminished, and actually all of the diminished chords in general, you know, they are beautiful sounds in their own right, and often they can be a little bit confusing to us when we see them in charts. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that's some help. Bye.